the absence of blood on the left side and the damage to the victim's face raised some questions for me as to whether or not the victim could have been shot while her car was up against the pole by someone standing next to her car. There are some indicators that help police and medical professionals make that determination. The problem is the interposed glass changes some things. The damage to the side of Caitlin's head obscured what might have been gunpowder, but the medical examiner did indicate to me that it could have been possible that the shots were fired. They all say the shots were fired close. My contention is that the shots were fired. She immediately fell to the right. That's why all the blood is to the right. There's also no blood on the left side of her clothing. Everything went to the right. It seems inconsistent to me that she could have been shot 700 feet away. Her car traveled to hit the pole, and then she fell over. But again, this is another indication of we have no one true fact in this case that we can take as a measuring point. And no one will answer the questions, no one will remove the confusion. Criminalistics responded when finally someone, and there's an argument between Detective Merriman and Officer Wallace, who called the supervisor to the scene. 25 minutes later, a supervisor came to the scene. They classified the scene as a crime scene. Criminalistics and homicide was called. Also interesting to me is that there was no interview with the medic that made the determination of the bullet hole and the impact to the victim's head. It should have been a critical person to be interviewed. There was no interview with that person. In Caitlin's vehicle was a note, kind of a map, a kind of a note, which had an address in it and some directions. When the case detective arrived, whose name is Detective Steve Gallegos, he took the note and did what any good investigator would do, took the note and followed the directions and went to the location that turned out to be the last person that we know of that saw Caitlin alive. Detective Gallegos followed the map to an address on 19th Street, about 1.5 miles down Lomas, would be off the intersection of 19th and Lomas. He interviewed the person named Sharon Smith. Sharon identified herself as a new friend of Caitlin's that they met at Fair Plaza. Sharon Smith had a snow cone cart at Fair Plaza. Caitlin worked at Pier 1 that was in Fair Plaza, and they developed a friendship. This was supposed to be the first time that Caitlin had visited Sharon. Supposedly, Caitlin arrived at 9:30. That's the information on Detective Gallegos' report. And she left at approximately 10:45. Sharon Smith tells Detective Gallegos that Caitlin was upset because she had had a fight with her boyfriend, whose name is Dung or Yun Nguyen, a Vietnamese young man that was living with Caitlin in her apartment. Caitlin was upset over the fight. She wanted to avoid Dung. She wanted to try to find out where Dung was so that she could avoid him. And according to Sharon Smith, Caitlin was using the phone repeatedly during the time she was there to keep ringing the apartment, and there was no answer at the apartment. There was some discussion about whether or not Caitlin would stay the night. Caitlin decided, Sharon says abruptly, to leave and said she was going home to her mother's home, got in her car and left. She would have traveled eastbound on Lomas. Sharon provided some information to Dung Nguyen, the boyfriend, to Detective Gallegos. She indicated his work telephone number and where Caitlin and Dung had lived. After Detective Gallegos finished talking with Sharon Smith, he and another detective drove to Caitlin's apartment. The address is 303 Alvarado. They arrived about 3 in the morning and supposedly woke up Dong Nguyen, the boyfriend. He claimed he did not know where Caitlin was. He said that he had been home since 10 o'clock, which would be inconsistent with what Sharon Smith had said about the fact that Caitlin had been calling every couple of minutes between 9:30 and 10:45. They did a primer residue test on Dong, which was clean, and while there, he did admit that they had had an argument, but that said that everything was all right. While at the apartment, they found a note that was placed into evidence. The note was said to have been written by Caitlin to Dong. Started out with Hun, and it seemed like it ended up that everything was all right. That note is still booked into evidence as having written by Caitlin. And when you read the police report, it is entered in someone's version of what is in that note. When I saw a copy of the note, it is obviously written by someone other than Caitlin, other than an English speaker, and the transcription that was done was incorrect. The note was entered into evidence as saying, "I'm going to Mom's house." The note said, "I'm going to Nam's house," Nam, which is another one of the Vietnamese friends. It turned out that the note was not written by Caitlin at all. And APD accepted the explanation that the fight between Dong and Caitlin was over and unresolved, and there didn't seem to be a motive for Dong to have done anything to Kait. In contradiction to the apartment complex office file, which said just days or weeks before, Caitlin had sought refuge from the manager in the middle of the night, saying that she was afraid of Dong and that she was going to be in the process of evicting Dong. The Albuquerque Police Department did not verify Dong's alibi, which was that he was with 2 of his Vietnamese friends. They say that the friends verified his alibi, so they accepted it. They accepted that Dong said Caitlin and he were okay. They accepted that the note was written by Caitlin. They accepted that the alibi was supported by his friends. Yet, a few months later, when someone calls in a tip to Crime Stoppers and says 4 Hispanic young men were the shooters, they arrested those Hispanic young men, did all kinds of investigation, did all kinds of work, didn't take anything they said as an exception, even when the mother was saying, "My son Robert could not have done this because he was in custody at the time of the shooting." APD never even verified that. They arrested him, took them to court. The district attorney had to drop the charges against these Hispanic young men twice. The district attorney said the case against the Hispanics had fallen apart, but the district attorney recommended that the Albuquerque Police Department take a new look at the information that the family, friends, and other people were trying to provide APD about the illegal activities of Caitlin's Vietnamese boyfriend's friend.